Could the 2020 U.S. election become a battle of the billionaires? Michael Bloomberg has already plowed more money into his campaign than all of the other Democratic candidates combined. Will it get him a showdown with Donald Trump? I'm Imran Gata, and today on The Newsmakers, we look at money and the U.S. election. Mike Bloomberg is one of the richest people in the world and is not afraid of spending his money as he bids to become the next U.S. president. The media mogul and former New York mayor has already spent more than $500 million on his campaign, and he only entered the race just over 2 months ago. So imagine just how much he could spend should he actually win the Democratic nomination. Some opinion polls already have Bloomberg in third place, and his rivals are clearly wary of his financial power. Frontrunner Bernie Sanders accused him of trying to buy the election, as did Elizabeth Warren. But his strategy of spending big seems to be paying dividends right now. And billionaire Bloomberg has the resources to spend even more. So is having vast amounts of wealth enough to win the American election? We'll discuss that and more in a moment. But first, Natalie Perhonen has this report.
We are tired of billionaires buying elections.
This election is not for sale.
I can't speak for all billionaires. All I know is I've been very lucky, made a lot of money, and I'm giving it all away to make this country better. And a good chunk of it goes to the Democratic Party as well.
Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg isn't just one of the richest people in the US. He's one of the wealthiest in the world. Forbes puts his net worth at $61 billion. And he's spending a small percentage of that money to fund his run to be the Democratic presidential nominee to take on US President Donald Trump. Unlike his Democratic rivals, he hasn't taken part in the race in the first 4 primary and caucus states. Instead, his campaign strategy has been to wait for Super Tuesday next week. That's when a large number of states, including California and Texas, have primaries. Winning delegates on those days could propel Bloomberg's position as a contender. The former New York mayor is the owner of media company Bloomberg News. This week, it reported that Bloomberg has spent more than $500 million on broadcast, cable, radio and digital ads, according to advertising analytics. $190 million more than all of his active Democratic rivals combined.
Mini Mike, who I think he's gone. But you know what? He'll spend another $500 million. Don't forget, I spent 70 and I won, of my money.
Bloomberg's fellow candidates have argued that taking on Trump is about more than money. Critics argue he's performed poorly in debates, struggling to defend his previous financial support for Republicans and the stop-and-frisk policing methods in New York when he was mayor.
He argues that he is the safest bet to beat Donald Trump. He's not safe, he's just rich.
Michael Bloomberg, like anybody else in America, has the right to run for president. But he does not have the right to buy the presidency.
In Tuesday's CBS News debate, Bloomberg spoke about his involvement in the last congressional elections.
Nobody pays attention to the clock. All of the new Democrats that came in and put Nancy Pelosi in charge and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them.
A slip of the tongue, but one that has again highlighted his ability to take part in the business of politics. The question is how much of an effect his ability to spend big will have on Democrats when the party chooses its nominee in July. Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Will Marshall. He's the founder and president of the Progressive Policy Institute. Also in Washington, D.C. is Democratic strategist Kevin Walling. And in New York is John Burnett. He's a Republican strategist and political commentator. Good to have you all on the program. Will Marshall, so Bloomberg enters this race with single-digit support. Now it's up to about 15%. Is it because of his money?
Well, it's mostly because of his money. He's flooded the zone in a way that's just been unprecedented in American politics. He's spending $220 million in January alone. Somebody figured out that's $7 million a day and hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. So we've not quite ever seen an avalanche of spending like this. But we ought to be cautious because all he's got now is name recognition numbers. Nobody's voted for him. He hasn't faced the voters yet, so we don't really know what it all means. But there's no question that having a lot of money can get you before the public's consciousness and will get you on the debates and give you a chance to make your case.
Right. Kevin Walling, by all the other metrics, whether it's his lack of charisma on stage or at the debates, or the audio from the stop and frisk scandals to the NDAs and so on regarding Bloomberg, both personally and in terms of his company. When we look at those other metrics, his support should be going down. Is it because of the money then that his support is going up? And what does that say about American democracy, that he can just keep on chucking millions more, tens of millions more every month, and he might even get closer to the title?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I completely agree with Will in terms of his assessment of Mike Bloomberg. I think his support is a mile wide and an inch deep. I think the best 2 minutes that Mike Bloomberg had last night in the Democratic debate was the 2-minute ads that he ran during the debate on CBS. Clearly, he was not up both in the Nevada debate last week and the South Carolina debate this week to really forcefully confront the answers around stop and frisk, redlining, decisions he made when he was the 3-term mayor of New York, and really an inability to defend what he practiced as mayor. I think that has had the biggest effect on his favorability ratings in this race.
John Burnett, as a Republican, I'm curious to know your perspective on this, right? Because we always knew money was important when it came to the U.S. presidency, whether it's trying to get the nomination or trying to become the president when it's a 2-horse race. But has Bloomberg sort of exposed the game for what it is in its rawest form here by showing that you spend money and you get places?
Well, we already knew that, right? Money is the fuel of any campaign. But as my fellow guests have pointed out, the thing is that, one, nobody knew Bloomberg, so he had to spend a lot of money. Then 2, he has a lot of negatives. You pointed out the NDAs, the stop and frisk, but also the other comments regarding redlining, blaming those that are disadvantaged or disenfranchised, blaming it on the working class in terms of the Great Recession. So once you get past the try to build name brand recognition, then get past the negatives, then you actually have to spend more money to get your platform out there, giving people a reason to vote for you. Right now, he might be going up in the polls in terms of name brand recognition, but as my fellow guest pointed out, no one has voted yet. We'll see if this is a good return on investment come Super Tuesday. However, Bloomberg had let everybody know before he actually really started spending money that he's willing to spend up to $2 billion even if he doesn't get the nomination. Why? Because he's definitely afraid of socialism, afraid of Bernie Sanders. So he's out there trying to stop Bernie Sanders. Why? Because Biden has showed a lot of weakness, at the end of last year coming into, the start of the primary season.
Okay, and I'll get a response to that from our other 2 guests in a moment. But John, I'm curious about how the president has reacted to Bloomberg's campaign. So we know they've been friends, they golf together, and they have a history together, right? I mean, a lot of people say, Trump was a Democrat who ran as a Republican and Bloomberg a Republican who ran as a Democrat in many ways. But when the president gets personal, when it's, 5'4" mini Mike, needs a box and all that stuff, when he gets personal, usually it's because he's threatened by someone. So do you consider him a threat to President Donald Trump?
Well, I don't think that the president made comments regarding Mini Mike and anything else that he said regarding Mr. Bloomberg because of a threat. The thing is that Bloomberg came in attacking the president, and we all know that President Trump is an equal opportunity offender in terms of people that attack him. So Bloomberg came in attacking the president, attacking his policies, even though we've seen record low unemployment, booming economy, a lot of good things domestically and internationally that President Trump has accomplished. Given the fact that Bloomberg's coming in attacking the president is only defending his record.
Kevin Walling, unpack the idea that you need someone like Bloomberg to defeat Trump, that someone like Bernie would be an automatic loss for the Democrats, and that you need somebody who's rich and powerful and more centrist to actually defeat Trump as a Democrat. Unpack that for me, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the actual path. I'm not supportive of Michael Bloomberg in this race because of the problems that he has in his past. Again, the racial issues when he was the three-term mayor of New York, his NDAs, his comments about women. I think the majority of Democratic primary goers, when asked, want someone who can actually defeat Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders has made the argument that he's best situated to do that. I don't think he is, given his past comments that are coming out this week in support of Fidel Castro and others. I think the only person that's really been tested in this race is Joe Biden, who faced an onslaught of negativity over the summer into this fall and is actually running first or second in many of those Super Tuesday states, is going to win South Carolina on Saturday. He's picking up a big endorsement as we speak this morning from the majority whip, Jim Clyburn, and actually had a really strong debate performance. So I think the answer to both the Bernie situation and the Bloomberg situation is the former vice president.
Will Marshall, you agree with that?
Well, I don't know yet, to be honest with you. We have a problem on the Democratic side in which Bernie has the left nailed down, but that's not anywhere close to a majority of the party. But he does have an impassioned plurality of support, of 24, 28%, depending on where you look. And the rest of the field is divided. All the moderate challengers are divided. And I would put Bloomberg in that camp. We should say this about Bloomberg. We've been kind of tough on him, but you know, money is always important in American politics. There's no question about it, but it's rarely decisive. Over the course of a long career in politics, I've watched a lot of rich guys get into races and lose all their money. But Mike Bloomberg actually, he has a record in politics. He's three-term governor of the nation's biggest city. He's got a governing record you can criticize, you can praise, or both, but he's at least as plausible as, say, Donald Trump, who came out of nowhere, had no political experience, and more so than Tom Steyer, who really has simply used his money to get himself a platform for whatever reasons. So I don't want to dismiss Bloomberg as just a rich guy, because he's got a serious governing record, and he really is appalled by this president and wants to get rid of him, and he's put himself out there. If the other moderates fail, if Biden fails, if Buttigieg doesn't catch fire, then that's Bloomberg's moment, because he's not really a Democrat, and everybody knows that. He's sort of the last man standing theory is, I think, is what is propelling his candidacy forward. But it is not a crazy idea, given the failure thus far of the other moderates to coalesce around one candidate.
Yeah, it's worth noting that Hillary Clinton spent more than Donald Trump in 2016 and lost, and I guess that does disprove some simplistic theories when it comes to this. John Burnett, to pick up on the point that, you know, this man has a record as the mayor of New York City. It's no small city, and no disrespect to Pete Buttigieg, but it's far bigger and doesn't compare to him being Mayor Pete, right? Do we underestimate him as a politician because he has all this money and we fixate on that?
You know, there's a clear difference, not just in geography, but in terms of how you actually go about campaigning in a presidential election. Yes, Bloomberg appeared at in certain cities and certain forums to give a speech, but he's really not known to be a retail campaigner. You're not going to see Bloomberg out there kissing babies, shaking hands, you know, walking in parades, great distance, things of that nature. And that's what Americans are used to all over this country. Someone that's actually putting the soles of his or her feet to the pavement and really going out there and aggressively engaging voters. I don't see Bloomberg doing that. And that's another reason why he'll actually spend a lot more money just to compensate for that.
Right.
But yes, Bloomberg does have a record. It's a spotty record that will be attacked. But the problem with the Democratic Party is that it's really dispersed in factions, right? In terms of, the real question is, will they be able to coalesce? Will the far left Bernie Sanders supporters be able to commingle with moderate Democrats that still, trying to back Biden, taking a look at Bloomberg, trying to figure out which one of those two is the lifeline of the party, because they don't want socialism, they don't want to go far to the left. So this is going to come down to whether or not the Democrats can coalesce.
Well, a lot of people, Elizabeth Warren supporters, Bernie Sanders supporters, consider Bloomberg to be very similar to Trump or exactly the same as Trump. That's almost a different conversation, and maybe it would be best had if we had Warren and Sanders supporters on the panel. But I wonder, Kevin, when it comes to the issue of how that money is being spent. So John Burnett made the point that Bloomberg doesn't have that charisma. He's not that type of person to kiss babies and so on. He doesn't have a Clintonian charisma about him. And we look at how he spends this money. So it's not enough for him to have an empire of more than $60 billion and to have his own media empire and Bloomberg News and so on. He's also out there throwing money at Instagram influencers, people who are usually selling kale detoxes and whatever. And they're putting out, hey, vote for Bloomberg. Suddenly they became politically aware because they're getting $10,000 a month or whatever it is. And they're going out there and supporting this man in his 70s. Is that a mistake because it comes across as insincere, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the campaign infrastructure that Mike Bloomberg is building, and to Will's point, I mean, the whole ball game is really Super Tuesday. It isn't necessarily South Carolina, and we're just now less than a week away from Super Tuesday next Tuesday, where 14 states are going to go to the polls. He has built a campaign army of over 2,500 staffers in 45 states. Including all of those Super Tuesday states. You note the amount of money that he's spending on staff, $10,000, $15,000 a month for field organizers, state directors. That is really, something that we have never seen in a primary election, let alone a general election when we have a Republican and Democratic nominee. So it will be anyone's guess if that infrastructure can deliver for the former mayor.
Will Marshall, can that infrastructure deliver for the former mayor?
Well, I don't know. I think, as John said, I think Mike Bloomberg is not the world's greatest retail politician. He's a numbers cruncher, a technocrat, and a businessman. And so that is not his strength. And he's, as Kevin said, he's putting it all on television aimed at Super Tuesday. And states like California, there's no time to go and politic in a retail way in California, with that coming up just next week, or Texas. So this is not the usual way you get in, and this is not the usual way you run. But we're in a very unusual period in American politics, where strange things can happen, like the election of Donald Trump that nobody really saw coming. So you just, I think we ought to be a little humble about what the voters are going to actually decide here at the end. I will say that this about Michael Bloomberg, he has tended to overpay for his political influence. He spent enormous amounts of money on his 3 mayoral races in New York, spending over $80 million for his re-election campaign, which he won by 20 points. So, it could be that this is just a lot of money that circulates around there. But I wanted to make this point, that Bloomberg's pledged to spend on behalf of Democrats. So if you're not running for president, if you're running for Senate or the House or a statewide office, you're probably happy that he's out there criticizing Trump, putting tens of millions of dollars into campaigns with negative messages against the Republicans and Trump, and with this amazing field army of thousands of people that are out there on the ground. So he could end up being a Democratic asset, even if he doesn't get anywhere close to the nomination.
Kevin Walling, that's an interesting one, because I've even seen hardcore Bernie Sanders supporters who hate Michael Bloomberg and consider him exactly the same as Donald Trump, sharing his attack ads on Donald Trump, going, oh my God, he nailed him. This was fantastic, right? So in that sense, is Bloomberg an asset to the Democrats no matter what?
I do believe so, and as we saw in the debate, and to Will's point last night in the debate, he mentioned the amount of spending that he put in support of Democrats in congressional key races that flipped Republican districts that Donald Trump had won in 2016, and delivered a majority that then elected Nancy Pelosi Speaker of the House. So, the amount of spending that Mike Bloomberg has done over the years to support Democrats, he's also supported Republicans. Let's not forget he was the Republican-elected mayor of New York. So there's still questions about, party policy and party identity. But he has been a great asset to Democrats, especially with giving cover in those key districts and really taking the fight to Donald Trump in his advertising.
Yeah, and Kevin, talking about those large donations over the years within the party, or at least among groups that would traditionally be Democratic leaning, for example, those who are for gun control and so on. He's built that up over a long, long time, and this is a lot of money. Is that a sort of deeper influence? I mean, you could say it's a mile wide and an inch deep, but is that a sort of deeper influence that even someone like Joe Biden would find hard to match because Bloomberg has the receipts?
Yeah, it's a great point. He mentioned, Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, these organizations that he has really built and funded with his resources, especially too on the environmental front. So he's taken the fight to coal, really promoting policies that support addressing climate change in communities, with the idea that he wants to spend down all of his vast resources before he dies on policies and programs that he cares about. So that is an infrastructure in of itself. He touted some of the benefits of that work. 20 states, for example, that have passed background check legislation because of his direct lobbying, his direct support of advocacy, and his ability to elect Democrats up and down the ballot that support those policies.
John Burnett, would you prefer for him not to be the candidate?
I don't care who steps forward and receives the nomination. I think President Trump policies and his approach to making sure that America remains strong, I think that is a platform and a record of performance that's going to be challenging for any Democrat. But let me just make one last comment regarding Bloomberg and the amount of money that he's spending. I compare it to companies that actually spend a lot of money on a marketing campaign, right? But the thing is that you can spend a lot of money on marketing, but that only goes well if it actually results into sales, right? In this case, you can spend a lot of money, but unless it translates into votes, it's a failed proposition. I've watched plenty of commercials, right? When I went to the store, I ended up buying another product. We might actually end up seeing that with respect to the Bloomberg campaign. Now, Bloomberg's strategy might be, you know what, I may not be able to win the nomination, but he's trying to go into the convention with enough delegates so when it comes down to the second ballot, he can actually exert a certain amount of influence for the Democrats to choose the nominee.
Yeah, as was mentioned, he's targeting his campaign on states with very high delegate counts, such as California and Texas, and they vote in March, rather than trying to win each vote, which is interesting. Will Marshall, big picture, and again, I know Super Tuesday is still to come. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but for our great-grandchildren who will watch this on YouTube someday, in the year 2020, if it's a case of billionaire versus billionaire, ploughed versus ploughed, is it a good look for American democracy in 2020?
Well, no. If you ask me, I think it's a very bad look. We've got way too many rich people in politics now. American politics has always been privately financed, and it's almost very difficult to go to a public financing system like other civilized countries have because of the way the Constitution's been interpreted. So we're sort of stuck with this system, at least for a while, until we could make constitutional change. And no, it isn't a great thing that self-funded candidates, which means deep-pocketed rich candidates, have a leg up now in our system. And maybe, this proliferation of billionaires in our politics will capture the public's attention and get more support for a public financing approach. But it's just been a hard sell for those people who've been pushing it for a long time. But there is something wrong. You know, I looked at Pete Buttigieg. You're right. He's the mayor of a small city, not even the biggest city in Indiana. He only raised $6 million in January, which is nothing compared to the bigs, including Bernie Sanders, by the way, who raised $25 million in small dollar contributions. But, that's a disparity that it isn't right and that we ought to find a way to fix. And unfortunately, the deep-pocketed candidates have totally blown through the public financing that used to apply to presidential campaigns. So we're sort of in a wild open period where we need to think again about how we finance our elections.
Okay, gentlemen, I've got to wrap. It's been fascinating having this conversation with all of you. Will, Kevin, and John, good to have you on the Newsmakers. And thank you for watching. We will see you next time.